Hey, what's up guys, and today we're going to be looking at a computer build that you could go out online right now. Funny, right? You could go online right now and you could purchase all the parts for and put yourself together a gaming PC, great gaming PC, 6 cores, 12 threads, an RX 580 8GB version, and you could get all these parts including an SSD of 480GB, all for under $700. And all this just goes to show that prices have come down quite a bit in a lot of things. SSDs and GPUs are a lot cheaper right now than they were about a year ago. Now RAM prices are still pretty high and that's obnoxious, but component costs have come down quite a bit, and building affordable gaming PCs is once again somewhat easy to do as long as you have that sort of mid-range-ish budget. So let's go ahead and look at the parts list and see what you get for right now $639.91. Let's go. So it occurs to me this is the first time in a while that I've looked at some new parts. I've actually been looking at a lot of used things lately. Here's some used hardware. There's some more used hardware. Here's some very used hardware. And there's a bunch more used hardware. So you could say that I've been focusing on used PCs lately. But anyways, let's go ahead and dive into the parts list here. We start out with the AMD Ryzen 5 2600, and this is the most current generation of Ryzen processors. We're probably about, probably a little over half a year away from the next generation Zen architecture, the next generation Zen processors. That would be Zen 2 architecture. This being on Zen Plus is still a great value. At right now $166, you get yourself a Ryzen 5 2600. I have one of these processors. I was able to hit 4.2 gigahertz on it, though I was pushing pretty hard to get stable at 4.2, so definitely 4.1 fairly easily. 4.2, if you're willing to invest in a better cooler than comes in the box, you may be able to hit something a little bit higher. Though, again, with the stock cooler, really might even be limited more down to like 4.0, 3.9, but it is a really great processor just for general use, not just gaming. Then moving on down, we actually have the ASRock X370 Pro 4, and the reason I have this board on the list is it's an X370 board, which I don't actually care that much about. B350 boards are just as good, at least for overclocking and most things that people are going to be doing. But the X370 board here is only $50. So taking a look at this board, it has a couple of the things that I always look for when I'm looking at motherboards. And the first thing here is with a full-size board, I'm wanting those 4 DIMM slots for RAM, and it does have 4. So we can start out with 8 gigabytes, a 2x4 kit of 3000 speed RAM, and we'll get to that in a minute. But then we can upgrade to 16 gigabytes down the road once we have enough money for another identical kit of that RAM. If we only had 2 DIMMs there, it would be a case of we would have to replace the old kit altogether, and that would cost us a lot more money down the road. So having these 4 DIMM slots is awesome. The other thing for overclocking, you have an 8-pin CPU connector there. There's no like just 4-pin CPU connector. So it looks like this board should be a decent overclocker. Now obviously it's not going to be the best out there by any means, but you shouldn't be held back too much by the motherboard itself from hitting the maximum stable clock that these processors should be able to hit, unless you're running extreme cooling solutions, in which case you definitely don't want this motherboard. But if you're on this type of a budget, you're not looking at things like LN2 or extreme cooling solutions anyways. This board will do us just fine. So moving on down here, we have some Team Group RAM. This is a 2x4 gigabyte kit running at a rated speed of 3000 megahertz. And unlike first generation Ryzen, the second generation Ryzen chips, the 2600 specifically that I have, was able to overclock the Corsair LPX RAM that I have. I think I have a 3000 megahertz kit. I was able to get more like 3200 megahertz out of it. So it's highly likely that you'll be able to hit 3000 megahertz no problem. And there's even a chance you'll be able to actually overclock this a little bit faster than that. And since Ryzen does love its memory speed, this is a great way to get started. So going on down, then we have an RX 580 8GB version for $230, and I do want to pull up a bigger picture of this card. So you'll notice that we have a dual fan design, so I'm not really worried about the cooling capacity of the cooler on this card because RX 580s are not really that hot of a card anyways, so that should be fine. fine, and at $230, you really can't go wrong with an 8GB brand new 580. So I'm happy with that video card. Now, PC cases have always been one of those things that I've never advocating going cheap on, and this build does go a little bit cheap on that. And the reason I don't think you should go cheap on a case is because if you are upgrading just over the span of several years, if you get a nice case that you're very happy with to begin with, you're probably not going to have to upgrade your case for a very, very long time. This one, it's okay. It's about $30. Right now on Newegg, it's $27.98, and it does have free shipping with it. The reason I'm not a big fan with it is sort of the cage work up front in this case. You could have to, if you get a very long card, I think our RX 580 would be fine, but if you get a long card later on down the road, maybe something like an RX 2080 Ti, that's a triple fan design or something like that because you ran into a huge amount of wealth based on inheritance, then you may have to cut out some of this with like a Dremel or something, but for the most part, you should be good. It may have some limitations on just what you can mount up front as far as storage goes and where you put your hard drives, SSDs, that sort of thing, but it should be okay. And at $30, if you decide to replace it a couple years down the road with something else, that's not the biggest loss of money either. It's not a huge waste of money if you do replace it. And outwardly, once you get the system built, the case actually does look pretty good. And a couple last things to wrap up here. We have a 450 watt power supply. This is actually $10 if you do the mail-in rebate. If you do not do the mail-in rebate, it's still $30. But it originally cost about $50, at least on, I think it's B&H or something like that, is the store. So yeah, on B&H, it is $30 with a $20 mail-in rebate, so you get it for $10. And at $10, it's a great value. You're not going to need more than 450 watts for this particular build. None of the parts in there are extremely power hungry or anything like that. And it will give you room to overclock both your GPU and CPU. So it's 80 plus bronze certified, which is okay. I mean, obviously you would like to get a little bit better, but this is not a cheap power supply. It's not going to blow up your rig or anything, and it's a great price. So it's not a bad value at all. Windows 10 Pro is your operating system here for $10. You can get a key. Actually, usually you can get a key on eBay for a little bit less than $10. I've actually had them as cheap as like $3 in recent months. So Windows 10 Pro, if you are in the market for an operating system and you don't want to have that Activate Windows watermark, just pick up a key on something like eBay, CD keys. There are cheap ways to get a Windows 10 Pro license. And last here we have an Inland Pro 480 gigabyte SSD. And this thing is about as cheap as I've ever seen a 480 gigabyte SSD brand new. I have several of them. I haven't had any problems with them. That doesn't mean somebody out there doesn't have a problem with them. I'm just saying they're not going to crap out in the first 2 seconds unless you just happen to get a dud, in which case that's what warranties are for. But once you run out of space on your SSD, you can always invest another $45 or $50 in your PC, then to add a 1 terabyte hard drive to give yourself a little bit more mass storage. But the SSD side of this does give you that really snappy PC performance, especially when you're just perusing the internet, maybe in Google Chrome or doing whatever. SSDs are the way to go for having your operating system. And at $65, 480 gigabyte SSD is actually a pretty solid deal. So there we have it, our mid-range gaming PC in 2018, at least September of 2018, only $639.91, and you have yourself a rig that will play 1080p games or even 1440p games, depending on what it is you're playing, really, really well. Especially if you're into esports, you can definitely play most esports games at 1440p, well over 60 FPS. So I am curious from you guys, have you built recently? And if you have, let me know what kind of value you've gotten from building a PC. And talking brand new here, we're actually staying away from the used parts on this one. So if you built a brand new PC, how'd you do? Let us know down below. And of course, if you like this video and you want to see more of it, give it a like, share, subscribe, and comment down below. You can also follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos around me from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.